what does lawyer meltdown look like, right? And what are the signs?
I was kind of the victim of lawyer meltdown myself. It was affecting my personal life too.
Having that skill set as a lawyer, but applying it to running the business is really invaluable.
Here's a big one for lawyers. Am I doing things I shouldn't be doing?
Everything except the law will begin after a brief word from Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our virtual receptionist team.
So I do residential real estate, primarily landlord-tenant. My area of practice is high volume. It's a lot of clients and it's a lot of calls that I get. Before Answering Legal, I would have to take every single call or know that it was going to a voicemail and likely to another attorney. So it has been crucial for me to have Answering Legal and to have a live person answering the call and being the first line of contact for a prospective client.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I'm Taryn Winter Brill. Just call me TWB. Now, if this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all of the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Our guest today helps law firms improve productivity, boost their bottom line, and attract higher value clients. For nearly 2 decades, she's provided these services through her company, Legal Ease Consulting. Her company aims to help prevent lawyer meltdown and assist attorneys in building a practice they can take pleasure in. We love that. She's got some really great insights to share with us today. We are so excited to welcome Allison Johs. Allison, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, and thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, likewise. Excited to dig in. Before we, as they say, dig in, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the services that you provide for the legal community.
Sure. So I am a lawyer by profession. I practiced full-time for about 15 years. And then I sort of basically blew up my life, both personal and professional. I just really felt burnt out. At the time, I was working like 6 days a week. And then part of the 7th day on top of it, I was taking a ton of work home. I was marking up bills on the weekends. And I was just feeling really discouraged and burnt out. And I decided to basically just take a break. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I left my firm. I had originally thought that I would, take like a sabbatical or ask for an extended period of time off. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I'm not sure that I want to come back. I don't really know what I want to do at this point. So I just left with having no idea what my next step was, if I was going to try to come back to the firm or come back to another law firm or what I was going to do. And thankfully, I had the means to take some time to give myself an ability to think about what I wanted for the next step. And I realized that the things that I liked most about the practice were working with other lawyers and trying to make the practice work better. So I was kind of assisting the managing partner. I was the administrative partner at my law firm. I was doing a lot of work on marketing and business development and associate development and creating systems in the firm and trying to make things work more efficiently. And I realized that that was all the stuff that I liked the best about the practice. So I said, well, let me see if I can make a business out of that. And I was always very into law practice management stuff. And I read all kinds of books, even when I was practicing, about that because I just had an interest there.
Yeah.
So I started the consulting practice back in 2005. It's hard to believe that it's been 19 years. Next year will be the 20th anniversary of starting the practice, which is like crazy to me.
Congratulations.
It doesn't feel like it possibly could be that long. So now what I do is I help mostly lawyers, sometimes other professionals, but mostly lawyers with productivity and practice management, how they're running their business, sort of the back end. So, everything that you guys talk about on this podcast that you didn't learn in law school, right?
Yeah.
How to make things operate better, looking at, how lawyers are working and their staff on a day-to-day basis. Also looking at who their clients are. Do they have the right clients? Who are their ideal clients? And then how can we attract more of those ideal clients? So basically, that's the marketing and business development piece.
Yeah.
And I kind of fell into a little bit of a specialty on LinkedIn, not intentionally, but it happened because years ago, I'm very involved with the law practice management division of the ABA. And years ago, when a lot of lawyers were not using LinkedIn at all, we did a webinar on LinkedIn that got a huge attendance. So there happened to be a lot of interest around that time from lawyers trying to get into LinkedIn and is it worth it for them? What is it? Why should I do it? And then that turned into a book that I co-authored with Dennis Kennedy. I mean, we've done 3 different versions of that book. So I do a lot of work with my clients on LinkedIn. I speak about LinkedIn a lot. I speak about other marketing and business development, productivity and practice management topics as well. But I also do training on LinkedIn for law firms. I've done it for law schools. I've done it for bar associations, all kinds of other legal organizations. And then I love to write, so I also do some copywriting for some of my clients. So helping them write their website copy, on occasion helping them write blog posts and other marketing content that they need.
Yeah. Just incredible, listing all the things that you do and all the services that you offer. If there has to be something for everyone in that sort of your palette of services, I have to say, and just commend you, Allison. I was looking at your website and it details everything you just said in such a user-friendly manner, right? It's just so well executed and easy to read, and you figure out all the things that you do and how to get in touch with you and how you're excelling at all of these things. So you're very busy. We can see that. But also I think what adds so much value to what you do is you were a lawyer first, and then you realized you love kind of the business related, the law office management part of it, and kind of integrating those 2 skill sets is rare. And, having that skill set as a lawyer, but applying it to running the business is really invaluable. And your website demonstrates all of that. So I just want to say bravo to everything you offer it and how well it's communicated to the audience.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And obviously we're going to dig in live, and I know you're busy, so thank you for your time for sure, based on everything that you do on a daily basis. A lot of what your website covers is kind of preventing this idea of lawyer meltdown, helping to prevent it. So let's take a step back, Allison. Let's just establish, what does lawyer meltdown look like, right? And what are the signs for people wondering, well, do I have it? Do I not? Am I on my way? What are your thoughts?
Right. So, as I just said to you, I was kind of the victim of lawyer meltdown myself.
Right.
Right. I was doing too many things. I was really getting burnt out, and I really wasn't enjoying a lot of it anymore. And it was also affecting my personal life too.
Mm.
So, a couple of, as I call them, kind of warning signs. It's maybe a little bit tongue in cheek, but I'm sure that a lot of lawyers will recognize one or more of this. And I think a lot of us have experienced some of this at one point in time. I mean, look, based on what we do for a living as lawyers, it's going to be stressful. There are going to be times that you want to pull your hair out, right? But one of them is, look, you're working more and more hours, and it seems like, and this is especially true for solos and small firms, I just keep churning, right? I'm working more and more hours. I'm not making any more money, even though I'm working more hours, and I may end up making less money, right?
Yeah.
And that could be for a whole host of reasons. From, I'm focusing on the wrong kinds of tasks during the day, or I'm working in a small office and everybody is working in a silo, right? We don't have one consistent way of doing things. So if something happens and I have to pick somebody else's work up, or I have to answer the phone for their client when they're on vacation, I'm wasting a lot of time that I don't get compensated for necessarily in terms of money coming from the client, because I'm spinning my wheels trying to figure out what they did. And it's not easy for me to figure that out. Or I'm wasting time with turnover, right? That's a big one too. And maybe I'm getting the wrong employees, or, it's like a revolving door and people are leaving, and now I have to train somebody new, and then that person leaves, and we have no consistency. And then I'm spending my time on that instead of spending my time on taking care of my clients. So So that's one. Maybe you're not loving it anymore, right? You've forgotten why you decided to go into the practice of law in the first place. Or maybe the practice area that you chose is not what you thought it was going to be. And you're spending a lot of time doing things other than what you thought or what you're passionate about. So that's another warning sign. Maybe you're just buried under paperwork and you're always afraid that there's some ticking time bomb hidden somewhere in the paperwork, which may not be paper anymore. We used to have these big piles of paper all over. Now that it's just electronic files, and even though in theory it should be easier to find things that way, sometimes it's not. Maybe something's buried in your email inbox and it's taking you forever to find it, or it because you get another 30 emails on top of it, it just falls through the cracks, right? So that's a big one, a big warning sign. Or maybe you just you can't stand your clients. You find that when a client calls or comes to the office, like you're dreading it. You don't want to pick up the phone. You don't want to talk to that client. Or the clients are constantly questioning you or pushing back, and it just makes the whole interaction very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So all of those things are kind of warning signs like, all right, maybe I need to take a step back and look at what I can do to make things better.
Yeah. Or maybe it's all the above. Maybe it's a little bit of everything you just said for a lot of people. Like, oh yeah, I've experienced that kind of. So let's talk about preventing it, Allison. Obviously, I love the fact, not love it. I'm sorry you went through it, but it's comforting to know that you experience meltdown, right? So you're speaking from someone who's gotten on the other side of it, right? It's not just someone lecturing with tips. You've been through it. You've been in the trenches. So how do we prevent it? Let's talk a little bit about making better use of work time, right? What are some tips you have for attorneys who are growing their firms, who are running growing firms rather? How do they make better use of their work time to prevent meltdown?
Yeah, so a lot of it is planning. And then the other piece of it is taking a step back and reevaluating what you're doing and how you're doing it and why you're doing it on a regular basis. And a lot of times you get in the trenches and you're just trying to catch up, right? You're just working and you never take a step back and say, is this still serving me? And is it still serving my clients? Right. So it's not like a time management tip the way you typically think of time management tips, but it's more big picture, right? Are these the right clients to begin with that I'm working with? Am I doing things the way I did them 15 years ago and not realizing that there are new tools out there that would make this so much more efficient for me?
Yeah.
Is my staff trained properly? Do they understand what they could be doing? And here's a big one for lawyers. Am I doing things I shouldn't be doing? Am I holding on to work instead of pushing it out to other people? And that goes even for a solo. You might not have the capacity to hire a staff per se, or a full-time staff, but maybe you could hire a virtual assistant, or maybe you could delegate work to a technology tool that didn't exist 10 years ago.
Right.
Or and if I have employees, am I hoarding work because I'm afraid to give it to them because I'm afraid they won't do it the right way? You get that syndrome, sort of, I'm the only one who can really do this.
Yeah.
And so one of my tips is to really separate what I call your high value from your low value tasks. And the high value ones oftentimes are the ones that really only you can do. And that's because you have the education or you have the relationship with the other person that somebody else can't do that. Or looking at what parts, there may be parts of a task that I have to do for those reasons, but there may be other parts that I could offload, right, to somebody else. So really thinking about where you can get the most value out of the time that you put in.
Yeah.
And out of the education and the knowledge that you have and the experience that you have as a result of what you've done up until this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are really sort of fundamental things. And there are a whole bunch of more sort of granular tips on how you can use your time better. I actually wrote a whole book for the ABA Law Practice Division with Dan Siegel on, which is called "How to Do More in Less Time," and it has a lot of those kinds of tips in terms of how do you work more efficiently with your email, how do you work more efficiently with your calendar, how do you delegate work more efficiently. There's a whole host, and then we have a whole host of very specific tech sort of shortcuts that people can look at. As a matter of fact, I probably have a copy of the book.
Yeah.
Right here. Is anybody's?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. So there's a ton of more specific tips, but
Right.
unless you take a step back and look at what makes the most sense for you to do
Yeah.
overall, even those little tips aren't necessarily going to be that helpful. And the way I typically talk about that is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, right? So you can do a task very efficiently, but that task might be, I'm cleaning out my desk drawer, right? Is that the best use of my time?
Right.
Am I going to be really effective by doing that? Or would I be better off saying to somebody else, clean out my desk drawer, and organize it. And I'm spending the time going out there and trying to meet people so that I can bring in business and,
Right.
and grow my firm, or looking for the best talent for my firm and let somebody else do those other tasks. Or maybe they don't need to be done at all. That's one too. Or there are things that I'm doing that we don't need to even do anymore. Does
Right.
it make sense to be even taking this step?
Yeah. So it sounds like, so much to unpack there, but on a basic level, you really need to pull back and assess everything you just mentioned, right? Some of it involves delegation, some of it involves efficiency versus effectiveness, which I love. It's a great distinction. The tasks, the clients, there's so much there. You also mentioned specifically, Allison, some of the tech tools, right, that you recommend to increase efficiency and maybe effectiveness. Any favorites that you'd recommend when it comes to tech tools?
Yeah. It's hard to recommend a specific tool overall to all lawyers because
Yeah.
oftentimes it's very dependent on what kind of practice you have. Is it a transactional practice versus a litigation-based practice?
Sure.
Or are you in a city or are you in a rural area? Are you billing by the hour, or are you billing on a flat fee, or are you billing on some other basis? And how many users are going to be using this tech tool? That may make a difference too in whether or not this is the right tool for you. But in terms of categories of tools,
Yeah.
practice management software is the big one. And I'm still surprised by how many lawyers and law firms, particularly solos and smaller firms, are still running their practices like with spreadsheets in Excel, or maybe not even in Excel, and Word documents, instead of having a real practice management software program. The programs now have so many more features than they had even 5 years ago. Things like having a client portal are, talk about, time savers. If the client doesn't have to call you every time to ask a question, if they can just log in to the portal and they can see, I thought I had a deposition coming up, or I was supposed to come into your office on the start. If I can log in and look at my calendar on the portal, then I don't have to call and talk to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that some clients won't, because some clients just would rather make the phone call. But now with everybody on, with these devices and their computers, logging into apps or to portals is not an uncommon thing.
Yeah.
So, they can see their documents, they can see upcoming, appointments or events, and they can even send you a message through the portal, and then you can message them back through the portal, and maybe they can message you when they're thinking about it at midnight instead of, calling you or,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
So that's a piece within the practice management software world that I think is underutilized still by a lot of law firms.
Really? It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'll hear that it's still being underutilized, for all the reasons that you mentioned of how it can be such a great, a huge advantage. So it's practice management software. And if someone listening is like, all right, I've just been daunted by the technology. I have so much technology. I don't want to add something else to the mix. Where do people go to figure out? Because as you said, it's not one size fits all. It depends what software you need. But in general, practice management software, how does someone figure out how to navigate all the choices? Is there a place to go to where someone can help them say, okay, this would
Yeah. So, there was a time where there were places that would really, I mean, there are a few sites online that kind of give you a little bit of information about the different options that are out there. The problem is, and one of the hats that I wear at the law practice division is part of the Legal Technology Resource Center.
great.
And we keep going back to the idea, because at one point in time, way back when, we did have sort of a tool that you could go in and look. The problem is that these companies come out with new features constantly. So it's like a full-time job to stay on top of who's got what at any given point in time.
Right.
But there are consultants out there who, I mean, I could consult generally on talking to you about your practice and laying the groundwork and trying to figure out what are the features that would make the most sense for you.
Yeah.
But there are consultants out there who specifically consult with respect to making choices on practice management software, and then helping you get it installed and walking you through the process of getting trained on it and all of that. Because the companies will often provide training, but sometimes you don't even know what training to ask for. So there are consultants out there that can help with that. I know like Affinity Consulting Group is one of the groups where they have people who specialize just in that, who can say, all right, what kind of practice do you have? What are your needs? How do you bill? And ask you a whole bunch of questions, and then say, okay, these are the possibilities. These are the ones that would fit in. Let's look at them, because some of it is what is going to make the most sense for you as a user, or your group of users, depending on, your solo or whoever else is in your office. Is this intuitive for you? Does this make sense? And, sometimes you have to go through the process of doing a demo on 2 or 3 different systems to see, this one makes more sense for me. I understand this better. This one has a couple of features more, but maybe I don't need those features. And I'd rather, because the bottom line is, the greatest system in the world is not going to work if nobody uses it. So you want to make sure that you've got something that your people are actually going to use.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about getting a diagnosis, basically, right? Where are the shortcomings rather in my firm from a technological perspective, and which software do I need? And of those options, you look at the menu, what's best? So absolutely, a consulting firm can help with that. You mentioned Affinity or Infinity? Affinity. And also your services, what you do, right? When you check out your website, you help a lot of firms with their technological needs. So it's really important. It's the first step is saying, okay, I want to embrace it. But then the next step is, okay, I need some help to diagnose. So super, super important. I want to pivot now, Allison, to AI technology. Obviously, hot topic. It's changing the world we live in by the minute. What advice do you have for lawyers that you work with on utilizing AI technology and finding the right ways to incorporate it into their practice? Because I'm sure, just like practice management software, where there's a lot of options, right? And it can be overwhelming. So how do you cut through the clutter and the noise, so to speak?
Yeah. Right now, I think, because it's still relatively new with respect to the legal space specifically. I mean, AI is not necessarily new, and it's being incorporated into a lot of products. You may or may not even know that AI is working in the background. I mean,
Exactly.
something as simple as your spell check and things like that within programs that you've been using for years, as they're updating, they're all adding AI components. I mean, look, even your Google search now, right? You do a Google search, what comes up on the top? You get like an AI summary, right?
Yeah.
So it's everywhere. But you need to educate yourself about what are the different kinds of AI programs that are out there, and look for legal specific programs. Because as lawyers, we have certain ethical obligations and certain obstacles and certain things that we have to be concerned about with respect to confidentiality and all of that. And so the programs that are built specifically to for lawyers are taking some of these things into account. And so that's a good place to start. There are so many programs now. I mean, in terms of education, right? So what you want to do is try to get educated. And that may mean, let me do a couple of CLE programs, even if I'm not getting CLE credit for it, even if I'm in a state where I don't need CLE, but go out there and listen to the people who are vetting these programs and looking at these programs, and let them say, this is what's out there. This is what's possible.
Yeah.
This is what you might use it for. I mean, I'm seeing more and more people doing these kinds of programs and even demonstrating some of them to say, this is how I'm using this program, or this is what it's good for. You want to make sure when you start using some of these programs that you understand what the limitations are of the program. I mean, we've all heard the nightmares about the hallucinations and everything else. So you want to make sure, and most of these programs will tell you right up front where they have gaps or where they're not sort of where their limitations are.
Sure.
And so you want to be paying attention to that and figure out, well, how am I going to accommodate, or how am I going to adjust for the fact that there are those limitations? And one of the ways is you have to check the work.
Right.
It's just like if you handed something off to an associate, if they give it back to you with case citations, you want to make sure that those cases really exist, right?
Yeah.
And that they're not just made up answers.
Right. It's sort of like,
So you always want to double check the
Right.
results. And if you're using a particular AI program that's built for a specific purpose, make sure you understand that it may work for this purpose and not for a different purpose. So you may need more than one AI tool for different tasks that you're undertaking. And a lot of these programs, they have training. I mean, for me, I've seen more lawyers implement whatever kind of technology or software or what have you, and they don't really take the time to go through the training or to require that their employees go through the training and then to refresh that training, on a regular basis. Number one, because there's always changes and there are new features. But number two, because there's only so much you're going to absorb the first time that you do a training.
right.
And then you're going to use the parts that you learned how to use, and you may never get to the other pieces of that technology that you just, because you can only absorb so much at once.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the biggest thing for me would be to go out there when you see one of these CLE programs or something or a talk that somebody's doing on these AI programs, just jump in and just try to get the lay of the land and get educated. It's hard to give more specific advice than that because everything is changing. Tomorrow it could be completely
right. It's not one.
the other thing I will say is one of the best uses to me for AI tools is they're very good at analyzing large amounts of data or picking information out from large data sets, which humans, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
Right. So it may be that you're just asking it to pull information out of a data set that you're giving it. And again, you have to make sure this is going to be private. You're not sharing confidential information, all of those kinds of things. They're great for generating ideas, or on the other end, if you're talking about writing or refining something, you write it up and then you give it to the AI and say to refine it or to change some of the language to make sure you're not using repetitive words or what have you.
Yeah.
But to me, those are the main ones. But again, they're developing these legal AI programs and integrating AI into your workflow. I mean, they're great for intake.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Related also to maybe to practice management. There's a lot of possibilities, but I think, like you said, where to start? Education, continuing education, right? There's so many options out there in terms, it's their job to present the menu to you and you see what might fit. But also you make a good point that even with these tools, you can't solely rely on them. I always say it's like the basic spell check, right? You could do a spell check and it spells the right word, but you have the wrong word in there, right?
Right.
It spells the word correctly, rather, but if you have the wrong word, it's not going to pick that up. So
Right.
usage sometimes. So things like that. So you make some really valid points, and can't stress how the importance of it. And also just keeping up with the other firms, right? There are going to be people that want a firm that's up to speed and operating in modern times. You have to keep up with the competition. I want
Right.
to
Yeah, I
know-
think that's
Go ahead, yeah.
true also. Just sorry to
No,
interrupt
please,
you.
go ahead,
I
yeah.
think it's true for, clients are going to come to expect certain things,
Mhm.
but also when you think about the recruiting end and you're bringing in
Yeah.
young lawyers or staff or what have you, they're going to want to work in a place that's using the most up-to-date tools, and that especially if they're starting to learn this stuff in the law schools. There's all kinds of legal innovation tournaments. They're building AI tools in some of these law schools now. They're using AI for all kinds of different projects. And then they're going to they're going to want to have that same ability or use those same tools when they are looking for where they want to land in terms of where they're working.
Yeah, and it's so important as well. Another reason to dive in, because it's all about attracting talent, right? And the newer generation, all they know is digitization. So it's really key. It's a matter of educating yourself, finding a start point, and embracing it, and going from there. Let's pivot into something else that you help attorneys with, Allison, and that's refinding the passion for the work that they do, right? So if any of our attorney listeners fall into that category, they're struggling to enjoy their job, the day to day, what advice would you share with them in refinding that passion, so to speak?
So I always start by asking what the reason was why they went to law school or got into this particular area of the law. I mean, most lawyers have some kind of a story about why they chose this as a career. And some of them fell into it. I mean, I didn't grow up wanting to be a lawyer. I mean, I went to law school, I practiced law, and now I'm not practicing anymore, but I'm still very much in that world.
For sure.
And it's fascinating. I do this too. One of the other things I do, one of my clients is a law school locally, and I do a lot of interviews of alumni, and tell the stories of different alumni. And it's always fascinating to me when I ask them, what made you decide to go to law school, or what made you choose this area of practice? And some people start off saying, when I was 5 years old, everybody told me I talk too much, or I like to argue. And, somebody said to me, you should be a lawyer. And some people say, I was in a completely different career and something came up and I pursued it. And I went to law school just as sort of to supplement my education. And then it turned out that I fell in love with X, and my career went in a completely different direction. Right. So what's the reason why you chose this as a career, or how did you end up in this particular practice area or with these particular clients, right? Sometimes the story is something happened in my life, or I saw something happen to somebody else, or I saw some kind of injustice that I wanted to correct, or there was this population that I wanted to help. So we start there by saying, okay, let's try to find that. Is there any of that still left in your practice? And how can we amplify that?
Sure.
And if not, how did you get away from it? What are the things that you like about what you're doing now? What do you like about your practice? What don't you like about the practice? How can we get more of what you do like and less of what you don't like? Trying to identify the obstacles. So maybe you're just feeling overwhelmed because you're a solo and you have nobody else to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah.
You're working kind of in a vacuum. And I think since COVID, even though I hate to keep going back there because, it was pandemic started 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's still affecting people because there was a change, and it didn't affect us for 2 months. It affected us for 2 full years, and a lot of things didn't go back to the way that they were before. So a lot of people are still very isolated, especially if you have a solo practice. Maybe you gave up your office. Maybe even if you're working in a law practice, maybe it went virtual or hybrid, and you don't have that personal connection with people anymore. And you don't have somebody to bounce things off of. So, sometimes with solos, I tell them find some other solos, even if they're in a different practice area, and create like a mastermind group, because you're still running into the same issues, even if they're not the same legal issues.
Right.
You are small managing partners or partners in small law firms. We don't know how to attract or keep talent, right? My clients are bugging me about X, Y, Z, or I'm having this problem. I'm in the market for this kind of new software. What are you all using? What do you like about what you're using? What do you not like about what you're using? So it, could be something as simple as having a sounding board, or are you overwhelmed because I think I mentioned before, the practice area that you chose isn't what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. What you think about and what you study about in law school may not be what the reality is of the day-to-day of that practice. Or maybe it's changed in the time that you've been working in that area of practice.
Right.
So maybe there's a different service that you could offer even within the same practice area, or maybe it's delegating pieces of what you're doing to somebody else. So, trying to look at, why did you get into it? What do you like about it? Where are the obstacles? And then thinking about, I always ask also, if you had a magic wand, what would your practice look like? And that kind of gets into this whole idea of, vision and mission. And I have a tool on my website, a vision and mission statement workbook, that asks a bunch of questions and gives some exercises and things. But thinking about, well, okay, I'm miserable where I am right now, right? I'm not seeing the results. Well, what are the results that I want to see? Because then we can figure out maybe how we could get there. What would you want your practice to look like if there were no limitations?
Yeah, I
Because
love that.
until you know what that is, it's hard to figure out where to go or what to cut out or what to change.
Yeah, and we were going to talk about that. One of my questions, like you talk about the importance of lawyers to define a vision for their firm, as you just said, in the ideal setting. What does the dream look like? And that's so important to compare that to where you are. I always call it, it's like, what's the state of the union? And that's what you're saying for people that are burned out, right? That are struggling with the enjoyment of why they went into it. It's pull back. The most important step is to take that state of the union and then diagnose from there, and all those different areas where it could be, or maybe it's many, right? And then tweaking and changing from there. So again, your website talks a lot about this. I want to go back to something for a second before we get into the process for defining that vision. You mentioned earlier that a lot of lawyers think that the cure to some issues is, well, I'm just going to work harder, right? I'll just add more hours, right? Why is that the opposite of what you want to do? Why is that ineffective and even a dangerous strategy?
Well, because you end up with burnout and mental health issues, physical health issues, personal,
everything,
relationship issues, relationships in your personal life, relationships in your business life. Your clients can detect when you're miserable, right? And when you're churning and churning and churning and working more and more and harder, you're not giving the clients the attention necessarily. And a lot of clients who are disgruntled, it's not because of the substantive legal work that gets done, it's because of how they're treated. They may not even understand the legal piece of it, but they understand how you make them feel, and whether you have time to talk to them, and whether you're responsive to them, and how quickly you respond to them, and how empathetic you are with them.
Yeah.
Just trying to remedy everything by putting more hours in leads to, my website is Lawyer Meltdown, and it's named that for a reason, right? And plus, there's only so many more hours that you can work. At some point, you're going to hit the ceiling. Even if you're working 24 hours a day, that you can't make any more. We can't make any more hours.
Right.
Right. So what you really need to do is identify where the log jams are. Why Do I think that it's more hours that's the answer? Do I have too many clients? Everybody thinks more clients is better. It might not be. You might want fewer clients
Yeah, less is more.
or higher value clients, or who pay you more per hour if you're an hourly, right? Maybe I'm not charging enough. Maybe I'm not weeding out the clients that I shouldn't be working with. And I'm spending all my time on the squeaky wheel, the clients who are problem clients, and my great clients who, if I paid attention to them, would send me more work themselves or refer 10 other great clients to me, are getting ignored. And so instead of getting the great business, I'm getting more of the business that I don't want.
Right. And I think the distinction there, though, why I wanted to come back to this question, because obviously it's all related to meltdown with everything we've been talking about, but it's not just about adding more hours. It's more of, do I have the right dedication for these hours? Right. And the distinction you just made, sometimes less is more. It's quality over quantity, right? Just kind of pulling back and saying, all right, where's the best financial gain? How many hours am I putting there versus
Right.
everything you just mentioned? So it's really important to take that inventory, the state of the union, and say, okay, where do I fall in that model that you just mentioned?
Right. And maybe it's, I'm spending more hours, but there's a tool that I don't know about that could help me do this faster or more effectively.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's time for me to hire some help,
Right.
whether that's full-time or part-time or virtual or whatever. And I know a lot, it's hard to make that leap sometimes to say, all right, now I'm going to be responsible for paying another person and I'm taking on that. But if we take a look back or a step back, maybe by spending a little money, you make that much more money because that person is taking care of tasks, which frees you up to do other things that might bring in more money. Or they take away the things that you're doing that you can't bill for at all.
Right.
Right. The administrative stuff, the busy work. And then you can focus on the things that are bringing in the money.
Right. I always say sometimes sometimes you save money by spending money, right? That's what an investment is. And it's something that just doesn't apply just to the legal industry, to all industries, but it's really important to just acknowledge that. Just want to fine tune a little bit something you mentioned before about as you struggle with enjoying the original passion for why you got into the business and defining a vision of what utopia looks like for you. Anything specifically about how that process looks? Is there anything more you can add to that? Or is it just simply saying, hey, this is where I am and this is where I want to be? Or is it a really granular process, I guess is what I'm asking. Is it an easy?
I think there's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Right. So we want to look at the big picture and that sort of that magic wand, but within that, there are certain specific things that you want to think about. So if you want to wave that magic wand, what do I want the firm or my practice, if it's just me, to feel like? What do I want the culture to be like? How do I want people to treat each other? Who is my ideal client? And there may be more than one. If you have multiple practice areas, you may have different kinds of ideal clients. How do I want the business to come to me? How much money do I want or need to make? Do I want any employees or do I want to have no employees? Do I want to have partners? If I'm gonna bring on an associate, am I prepared at some point in time to share part of the profits or the practice with them? Do I want a partner? And what does that look like? What areas of practice? Do I want to have a mostly transactional practice? Do I want to do a lot of my work virtually, or am I more of a hands-on person? Do I really want to be in person with people?
Yeah.
And in that vision, you want to go back to what's that passion? What am I passionate about? It may not be the practice area. I may not necessarily be passionate about criminal law, but I may be passionate about helping, young people. And so I happen to do that through representing criminal defendants who are youthful offenders or something along that line. So where is that passion? What is going to make me want to get up in the morning and go to work every day?
I love your answer there. So comprehensive because some people will be like, oh yeah, I just want to, my goal is to just have a mid-sized firm with X amount of attorneys and we focus on that. what you just said in terms of the granular level, all those things you just said that you have to address are a lot of very obvious things, but people aren't really thinking about them, right? Because they're focused on the law. But that's where you come in to say, hey, here are all the things that you need to address. And everyone's thinking, oh, wow, those are really great questions. I hadn't thought about that, which kind of leads into one of the final questions I had for you, which is what you do, which is what your consulting firm does, is why is it so valuable to get an outside perspective on how your firm is operating? And I think everything you just mentioned is the reason why.
Yeah, well, that's certainly part of it. But when you're in something, you, you often don't know what you can't see. It's like you don't know what you don't know.
Love that. I say that a lot.
And I think having an outside perspective helps you maybe to address things that either you don't see at all, or maybe you kind of know about them, but you don't want to address them, and it's easy to ignore it. We're always very good at sort of trying to trick ourselves, but when you've got a third party, they're saying, holding up the mirror and saying, "Hey, look at this," or "This is what I'm seeing." Like, you may be saying this, and you may really believe that, but I'm seeing this, or you may be intending this, but I'm seeing, and that happens with me a lot of times when I talk to staff, or I talk to other attorneys. I'm working with the partners and they tell me one thing, and I talk to the staff or the attorneys and I hear something different.
Right.
So now that may be because they're not communicating. Sometimes people are afraid to tell the partners, sometimes it's easier to talk to a third person. And so the same thing goes with you and your practice. Sometimes it gets to be a little bit of an echo chamber if you're only talking to other people within your organization, or even other lawyers. It's great to have a perspective of other entrepreneurs, other business owners, just somebody on the outside. It's also very worthwhile to get feedback from your clients and your referral sources. What are you seeing? What would you like to see?
Yeah.
Are you seeing other things out there in the marketplace that maybe I'm not seeing? What suggestions do you have for how I could help you more? Thanks for referring me business. What can I do for you? What are you seeing out there that could help both me and you? And the same thing for clients.
Right. It's like what's working and what isn't, right? Sometimes you just need that third party to fill you in. So I'd probably rephrase the question to talk about just how invaluable it is to get an outside perspective for everything you just mentioned. And I'm glad we really dug into it, because there's different facets of it. All those questions you asked earlier of a firm, but then everything you just added to it. So it's like, yes, having a facilitator, I love that metaphor of looking in the mirror, right? And just saying, hey, this is what's happening. You're just not seeing it. You're in the tunnel and you're surrounded by all these other like-minded people that, yes, men and women that are saying and have the same perspective as you. So, and that's obviously what you do. And in a moment, we're going to tell people how to get in touch with you. But you mentioned earlier, I did want to get this in, Allison, LinkedIn for lawyers, right? You're one of the leading authorities on it, something you specialize in. Let's dig into that just a little bit more. What is one way attorneys can make better use of their time on LinkedIn, right? They have busy lives, there's social media, there's AI, but why is LinkedIn from your perspective so important, and what success have you seen with it?
Yeah, so I'm seeing, recently it has become more and more of an important platform for lawyers. I'm seeing more people actually get business from LinkedIn as opposed to just getting attention or awareness. They're actually getting business. People are actually reaching out. It doesn't mean that people are going on LinkedIn and saying, "I'm going to look for a lawyer." But what's happening, especially if you're in a B2B type practice, and maybe even if you're in a B2C, if you get referrals from other professionals, people are spending more time on the platform. Some of it may be fatigue with some of the other platforms that are more social, more political, more families and pets and vacations, and
Right.
and this is really more geared towards business people and what they're doing business wise. Although it is getting a little more social. LinkedIn's been experimenting with some different things. They try them and then they take them away and so forth.
It
But
is.
I think the main thing, I mean, look, you want to have a good comprehensive profile that represents you well. That's sort of the foundation of your presence, and you need to look at it periodically and update it. But it's really about the engagement. So it's a networking platform at its core. And just like when you go in real life, I always say what you do on LinkedIn corresponds to what you do in real life. If you're going to a networking event, number one, you don't want to just go and talk about you, because then people will start to avoid you like the plague, right? I mean, you have to show an interest and engage with other people. It's not about going and spraying your business card all over and then leaving. It's about starting to build a relationship. So it's about having interactions with other people, whether those are the private messages on LinkedIn, it's following people, engaging with their content, liking it, sharing it, but also providing value in the posts that you make and in the comments that you make when you're engaging with other people. So instead of just saying, this is a great post, put some of your thoughts in it. Maybe ask a question, maybe suggest another resource. Try to add value to the conversation. You're trying to develop a relationship, and you don't do that by just saying, that's great all the time.
Right.
You really want to have a meaningful, valuable engagement with people. And that's even more important than constantly posting content.
Right.
It's the engagement and the interaction and showing interest in other people. And then of course there is understanding what they are interested in, who your audience is, what information they might find valuable that you could provide to them. But it goes back to, you mentioned it earlier, the idea of quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Especially now with all these AI tools, and everybody can spray all kinds of content that's full with buzzwords and doesn't sound like you. People aren't, that it's not relatable.
Right. But
You want to be you, as authentic as you can be, and engage with other people, where you are. And it doesn't have to be perfect.
right. But I think
None of us are perfect.
yeah, right. But I think what you said is so important. A lot of people just think of LinkedIn. Yes, it's a professional network, but as you said, it's kind of blurring the lines of, is it a social network? But the distinction you made is, if it's about engagement, right? It's not just about posting, but engagement is the key. Engaging with people who could be potential clients, adding something, responding. And then from there, perhaps you create new business, right? I mean, that's the whole
Right.
point of engagement. It's not just posting. It's not just saying, hey, here are my services. So for a lot of people that are so overwhelmed with social media and the phone, I love what you just said, because I think that is a good use of your time as a lawyer, reading other and engaging with other people's content, right? And having that dialogue. It is a part of the job now,
Right.
as for all the reasons you recommended. So it's about engagement, it's response and starting that conversation. And then that leads to, oh, what does your firm do? Oh, I actually have someone who's looking for what you do. Let me connect you. So simply reading an article, responding, who knows where it leads. So I think people, lawyers specifically, really need to look at it from a business perspective. And it's not a time suck. It's actually part of your job and expanding your business. So I'm really glad we touched upon that. Another invaluable tool. You do so much, Allison, as we talked about at the top. I feel like we could talk about so much more. If viewers want to connect with you for the multitude and the variety of services that you offer, what is the best way to get in touch with you? Where can they go?
So, you can always find me on LinkedIn, and my name is Allison Johs, Johs. So it's a little bit of a unique name. It's not hard to find me there on LinkedIn. So you can always shoot me a message there. My website is lawyermeltdown.com, and there's a contact form on there. But if you want to reach out directly, you can always email me. It's Allison with 2 L's and an I at LegalEase, which is EASE, consulting.com.
Great. And I just want to thank you, Allison, for your time, but also getting so granular with your answers, giving us so many details and being so comprehensive with your responses. Because there's so much that you mentioned here that I feel like it's going to be really valuable / invaluable to a lot of listeners who, hey, I didn't think about that. It's a really good point. Yeah, that makes sense. So thank you again. And we wish you so much continued success, because you are really helping out a lot of people.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Likewise. And once again, our huge thanks to Allison Johs for joining us on the show today. And thank you to all of our listeners out there. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll be back soon with another episode of Everything Except the Law. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered in today's conversation can be found in the description of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm TWB. We'll see you next time.